There's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to it be Susan. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord, yeah, yeah.
All right, welcome again to New South Christians. I'm David Fuqua here, coming to you from Vol State. I've got a great story this afternoon, and I'm really excited about this. The person we originally had scheduled, something must have come up, so I was walking across campus praying. I said, Lord, just send somebody to us. And I ran into Margo here, and I found her in financial aid. She just finished a campus tour. She's not a registered student, but I think she fits perfectly for what we're talking about. So I'm going to let Margo introduce herself, and then we're just going to have a conversation. So go ahead, Margo.
All right. Hi, I'm Margo. I didn't believe in God for many years until just recently. And it was actually sort of the movie Jesus Revolution that made me come back to Christ. And also my mom, she was telling me how she didn't want to end up in heaven and not see me there ever again. And it really got to me, and I wanted to come back. And yeah, I've been in church all my life. I had a terrible experience in a big church, a mega church that was just awful. The pastor, the people, just not Christians, or not who it was supposed to be like, or not how it was supposed to be like. But I'm really glad that I found a church family that is genuine and real and cares, and who is the hands and feet of Jesus, really.
Well, I got to tell you something. You're blowing my mind. We've been doing this for a while now. We've had about 8 or 9 people on, and a lot of stuff I have written down on this card, you've just verified for me. Because you're representative of what we call Generation Z. There's a lot of things that have come out, things about the church not being authentic, about the pastors. So what I'm going to do is, if you don't mind, since it sounds like we're on the same wavelength, I'm going to bounce through a few things. And I got this from an article. It was called The Characteristics That Generation Z is Looking For in the Church. Okay. And I think based on your comment just now, you definitely can help us. And obviously, I'm an old school baby boomer, so we're on a different plane as far as this goes. So what I'm going to do is read some of this to you. Just tell me whether you agree or disagree. There's no right or wrong. First of all, I used to teach political science. There's a guy named Thomas Jefferson, very famous person from our history. He said every 20 years we need a new revolution. And a lot of people believe that that's what Generation Z represents to the church. But then there are other people that say Generation Z is killing religion. Okay? So this is some of the characteristics they say Generation Z says they want out of a church. Less performance, more presence. In other words, want to be open spiritually. They're very skeptical of organized religion. About 18% don't trust the pastors. And so what do you think about that?
What is organized religion?
Organized religion is like a formal church, like, you know, where, for example, many of the people in Generation Z say they call themselves nuns, agnostics, say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. In other words, my church might be in the woods today, you know, where I go worship nature, but not to a brick and mortar traditional church with a smoke machine, with a band playing, etc. And that's what they're saying. They find church should be less performance. In other words, I'm not going there to be entertained. I'm looking deeper for the spirituality of the connection between myself and God.
Definitely, but I don't think that worship is a performance. It's in the name, it's worship. You are singing and shouting and dancing and loving what you're hearing and giving it to God and having that moment of joy and worshiping Him and loving Him and showing Him your love before we go into the sermon and what you're going to be taught today. And every time I go to Generations of Grace Church, and we have a female pastor there. Oh,
I'm getting ready to talk about that. Go for it.
She's known me my whole life, and she is like a family member to me. And every time that she preaches, she says something that I needed to hear. And it is incredible. Just even before I was becoming a Christian again, she would have a sermon, and it's exactly what I needed to hear, and I listened, because I was very hesitant to listen. Sometimes I would just, zone out, but she really made me tune in.
Wow. Well, then let me ask you about that, if you don't mind. I'll deviate for a second. Uh, the women have always been historically the rock of the church.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. The men, due to interpretation of the Bible, have tended to be the leaders. And in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of disagreement among some of the denominations about the role of women in church in positions of leadership over men. Particularly the Southern Baptists have had some big churches kicked out that have women in positions of leadership. And more women are leaving the faith than ever before. So you mentioned that you have a female pastor. So what do you think about that?
I think it's amazing. Yeah, I love her with all my heart. And she said that the church she was at originally, the Grace Place, they turned their backs on her because she said she wanted to be a pastor instead of lifting her up and helping her pursue her dream, which she said she didn't even want to do that, but she asked God, and that's what he said to do. And so she was in the child place of the church. What is that called? Child director? Or
Youth director. A lot. They'll have different names, but the youth.
Yeah,
that's generally generic.
She said that was really useful for her preaching style to not necessarily dumb it down, but to explain things in a way people can understand. Because the Bible is so, just big words. Most of it you just can't understand. So she really makes you understand.
So why do you think so many women are leaving the church? I mean, they've been the rock for 200 plus years in this country. Because I know my grandmother, my mother, not to be bad, but the men in my family, including myself and my dad, we fell very short of the glory of God. But my mom was always the rock. My grandmother was always the rock. Now, those people, I'm not saying my mom's leaving, but a lot of these younger women are leaving the church. They're not staying. When you say leave the church, do you mean the building itself? Yeah, the building themselves. They feel like, that's what I'm not sure. What's changed, Is it because they can't, be in positions of leadership? Look, I teach economics. There's more women in the workforce than men. There's more women that have been going to college since the early 1980s. Well, clearly that's had an impact on relationships, on the role of women in households as the wife versus the husband. But at church, it still kind of stood that way for a long time, where the men were in positions of leadership over others and not women, but the women were still the rock, and that's not the case anymore. So why do you think they're leaving? Do you think they've just reached a point and said, Yeah, they just feel like they're not respected, or I know there's a line in the Bible of something about man, one of the first, it was Genesis, where there was let there be light. Right. And what was how he said, and then there was man or something, or. You're talking about the Adam and Eve story, creating man and woman? I think so. Okay. No, or just mostly how he mentions man, and I think that he meant mankind, as in people. And people have mistaken that as just men. And so we thought, or people thought, that he valued men over women, but it was. No, that's completely wrong. So therefore the interpretations from them forward have been only men can be an authority over the church, while women can serve, they can't be an authority over men. Yeah, there was a miscommunication. Interesting. And I really think the Bible needs to be redone, because there's so many transcripts. Well, what's interesting? I don't have a deep background like in English literature, but I know a lot of people. I know masculinity in literature, dominant by males, etc. So you're taking the same view that's obviously permeated inside the church too. Well, that's interesting. All right, here's another one: less production and more participation. In other words, you go into a lot of the mega churches, big churches, you got lights flashing, you got the smoke machine going, you got the services is tied to the minute. It's almost like a performance. You're producing something instead of people, praying to God, participating together. And the stage is kind of the focus, not the congregation, not the people. Yeah, I definitely think that. I've been to a church where it was a big production, the lights were off, and then there were the stage lights on, and then I've been to a church, roll, where there was a fog machine. I was like, what is happening here? So you think that's a little overkill? Yeah, but I would like to mention that my mom is the worship leader at our church, and
she said that when she invited her friends to church, she said this to me last night, that they said, "Oh yeah, I want to come and see you sing."
Okay.
And she's like, "That sounded wrong to me. I don't want you to come and see me sing. I want you to come and witness my church and worship with me and be there and hear the words of the Lord. I don't want you to come and see me sing. It's not a production." And another
Well,
thing
then that's exactly what I guess this article hit the nail on the head with that one.
Yeah,
So.
and when anyone gives her a compliment of, "Wow, you were amazing today," or "You sang great today,"
right.
she said, "That wasn't me. That was the Lord."
Wow.
And His light shining
That
through
is
me.
very humble, because the truth is, this podcast, that's the way I feel about it.
Yeah.
This isn't David, because this idea was put on my spirit probably over a year ago, but I don't know, I just either didn't feel moved or whatever. But then when it came back, I just knew.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's not me. It's not me, everything is for Him and His glory. But at the same time, the more I read about Generation Z and religion, and we're in the Bible Belt. This is the traditional buckle of the Bible Belt. And I've worked with Generation Z as a teacher for a long time, and I'm not, blind to what I'm seeing and hearing. And the more I guess I became closer walking with God, the more I realized, well, there's a reason for this, but it's not me. And it's not me doing it. So whatever good comes out of this has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
So I think we're on the same plane. Well, let me ask you this, because I mentioned the Asbury revival. Some of the people listening to this are going to know. But it was a huge revival, spontaneous, that broke out in a small college about 4 hours north of here in Kentucky called Asbury University. And it started with a group of students doing praise and worship in the morning in the old church building. Well, it ignited, and for the next 3 to 4 weeks, 24 hours a day, it was led by students, by young people, for the glory of God. When I went, there were literally thousands upon thousands of people from all over the world that descended there. And a lot of people believe that just what you said a minute ago, where you're talking about not a production to be that. There were no male preacher authority figures on the stage. There was no focus on the stage. And I went to it. Everything was in the congregation where people are praising and the miracles were taking place. And so that's what a lot of people say. The church needs to go back, less production, and it goes back to the other. So I thought that was pretty good. All right, here's another one. Less noise, more space. In other words, it's like when you're inside the church, particularly the big churches, everything's focused on the stage, the noise, who's talking the loudest, the production, the time. And they're saying down in that space where people are huddled is where God moves. Where you have the connection. And that's where the focus should be, not on the front.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah. So has your experience been most that where it's the stage that controls everything? Or have you had the opportunity to attend a church where it's down in the congregation?
I have experienced many churches. We were on a church hunt as a family of trying to find a new church after that bad experience. And I really loved this one church. It was very small. It was in a house, actually.
Yeah.
And it was filled up with people. There was like no more room. And there was no stage. And it was beautiful. It was just like a family.
Yeah.
But we were all, as a family, looking for a church. And not all of us liked the church. So we just started looking elsewhere. And eventually we all didn't like all the same churches, so my mom was like, "All right, y'all go find your church. I know where I want to be." So, yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, you keep mentioning, and you do not have to share anything that you don't feel comfortable with, but you say you have bad experiences. Is one of the things that pops out in all this research I read is a statistic that really bothers me as a person, as a believer, when it talks about how many people in your generation I don't know if it's don't like the pastor, but don't trust them, something like 18%.
Yeah.
And then there's over 1/3 don't attend church at all.
Yeah.
And they call themselves nuns, which are agnostics. In other words, I'm a spiritual person, but I don't believe in the formal religion, the traditional. And so you put all those together, and some of them talk about having bad experiences.
Yeah.
So unless it was something, you really don't feel it's appropriate to talk about, did you just feel alienated, or did you just?
There was just, Okay, so my brother was in jail, and he's been in and out of jail my whole life. He's a drug addict, and there was this youth pastor who talked to my mom, and he was like, yeah, okay, I'll go and visit him. I'll go and see him. And every time my mom sees him, she would ask, hey, did you go and see Richie? And he was like, oh, man, I was going to get around to that. I hadn't yet. He always made an excuse, and then one time he lied and said he did.
Wow.
And that was one bad experience, but out of the many, just some of it was the church and not the pastors, of the gossip and all of that kind of stuff. And also the clothes, like how you were supposed to dress up and wear things, and you would be talked behind your back or anything if you were wearing jeans and a t-shirt, or if you smelled bad, or if there was someone who was homeless who wanted to come to the church just to hear the words, they would be judged instead of helped and lifted up. And that's what I love about my church now, is that we are in the community and we help.
Right.
We have things for homeless people. We have food resources, and there is a building now where they can go and sleep. And yeah, it's amazing, and I love that.
Well, you know, it's funny for you to mention that. The first young lady that we had on this podcast talked about one of the reasons she became disconnected from the church was she was slut shamed. Well, I didn't know what slut shame meant. And then she enlightened me, and she said what she wore was misinterpreted. And I've had her in class. She's an excellent student, and I don't think I would have ever interpreted it the way she was treated. But it was the lack of kindness, the lack of empathy, the lack of what she felt like was a true Christian. And that was one of the things that drove her eventually away from the church and didn't return.
Yeah, my sister was called a slut. Actually, it was a youth pastor said it to my brother, and he never went back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and church camp, there was some bullying at church camp for my brother. He was tied down, and the youth leader was there, and he was like making fun of him and stuff, and just let it slide, didn't say anything, didn't get the people in trouble. And it was actually the youth leader's son who was bullying my brother, and he cried about it. He's still hurt and traumatized by that moment. He was tied down to a bed, and he had a gun in his face too. They brought a gun to church camp, and he said nothing. It was
That's ridiculous.
Like, wow.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, we got two more. Okay. Less personality and more humility. One of the things that a lot of Generation Z says, looking for a savior, not a pastor. In other words, when you look at some of the big mega churches, the personality of the pastor has become the thing people go for.
Yeah.
And they don't go for the, for the humility of it all. And so the idea is, the church and the pastor becomes like a product that you're selling, like I might sell Coca-Cola or Dr. Pepper. And they said that's really a problem.
Yeah.
So do you agree with that?
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Also, the last one says less head, more heart. In other words, it says, one of them says, Generation Z, we know a lot about God, but I don't know God. And to get to know God, I don't need somebody just to pour facts into me about God. I want to have a true experience with God.
Definitely.
Yeah. So do you feel that way?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, the Asbury revival is what a lot of people kept saying, is that they went there, they felt drawn because it was a true revival, but it was the experience there, the experience of prayer, healing, God's love, but it didn't come from the stage, it didn't come from one of the personalities, it truly came from the congregation out.
Yeah.
And you could look it up online. It went on for weeks. People from all over the world. The line I was in, the people from Brazil were in front of me. There were people from Washington and California in the back. I mean, they traveled all the way to a small place in California, which is pretty incredible as far as that goes.
Well, I'd actually love to share something.
Yeah, go for it.
I think part of being a Christian, or just a good person in general, is needing to share the love out in public with random strangers, anywhere you can. And something that I do is everywhere I go, I give someone a compliment. And it has to be genuine, it has to be real. And that's how I started breaking out of my shell. And eventually got confident enough to just be myself and be who I am.
Wow.
And remember how I told you I got these for $5 at the thrift store?
Yeah.
Well, I was there, and this lady, she went over to the piano and she played a little something real quick, and I smiled at her real big, and I was just like, wow, that was awesome. And I was checking out with my sister. We were paying for our stuff, and she goes out the door. I see her, and then she comes back in. The clerk is like, hey, didn't I just see you a second ago? And she's like, yeah, I had to go out to my car. Here you go. And it was $20.
Wow.
And she said, I'm a Christian. I just wanted to bless you today.
That is awesome.
Yeah. And
That
I said, just wow. And
Yeah.
I was crying, and I gave her a hug, and she's just amazing. And I was like, wow.
Well,
that
I'll tell
really
you what's
happened.
even more amazing than that. The next card I've got is, it says here, how to get Gen Z to church. In other words, if 1/3 have dropped out, so they're not going to church anymore, how do you get them back? And you've already said a lot of these, so you'll probably, this will be easy. The first one is be authentic.
Definitely.
Live the gospel. In other words, if you're going to claim it, live it.
Yeah.
And the thing, so real is what they're looking for as far as that. Another one is be kind.
Yeah.
Your first impression truly is the lasting impression. And there's, sad to say, there's a lot of stories where churches haven't, you know, like that first day you're there, you kind of feel the kindness or you don't. And then how do people treat you? And then like the story you told about the youth pastor, and then some of these other things you share, but then you contrast that with the woman in the store where you said, you know, an act of kindness. And see, you can tell that really resonated with you. Another one is give us time. I guess they don't want to be pushed in a hurry. In other words, come in, you know, jump on them right away. You need to believe in God. Go for it. I don't think that's going to go well. Another one is justice, folks, social justice. They say your generation is like, I don't know if you remember the George Floyd, you know, the gentleman that was held down, and, you know, other things that you see in the news. That Generation Z is very socially conscious when it comes to those, you know, social justice issues more than anybody else. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I think we are just fighting for justice, fighting for, you know, just decent respect and how we should treat one another. And we shouldn't have let that slide. I know we didn't. And we stood up for him because he couldn't. And I was definitely there. I put Black Lives Matter everywhere I could. And right now I even signed up to be in this thing where they're trying to get Black history back into schools. And so I'm going to be an advocate for that. You know, I really want that to happen because there's so much that is not talked about and covered up. And we need to bring that to the light, and people need to know their history.
Yeah, absolutely. Trust me, as a teacher, I understand that.
Yeah.
Something else that I found this interesting because I've been to Ireland 3 or 4 times.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
and the Irish pub, if you know anything about Irish culture, they're friendly, they're nice, they're kind, they're sweet. One of the articles I read said to Generation Z, the church should model it, not literally off consuming alcohol, but as an Irish pub. Because Irish pubs, everybody in there generally is super kind. And it's not like Americans think of a pub, a bar. It's a place where families congregate, young kids, adults, elderly, whatever. So it's a social gathering. The other thing they said, Irish pubs, people are very authentic. What you see is what you get. Nobody puts airs on as far as that goes. And in time, belief and behavior will come with it. So anyway, be authentic, be kind, you know, be gentle to people, be real, be authentic. And then in time, if I see Christ in you or whatever I believe, then you're more likely to embrace it and believe it. Really. So you think maybe we could model it after the Irish pub, huh?
Yeah, just not the drinking part. But yeah,
There
I
you
mean,
go.
he did say I turned water into wine, so
Yeah.
you know, we had some wine.
That's one way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I got to do a couple of, I call them negative things, but I think they're honest and real things, and then we'll be done. We'll wrap it up.
Okay.
One of the things that's bothered me, and everybody I've interviewed, I've felt this, when you talk about suicide, depression, anxiety, mental health. I know that your generation bore the brunt of, you know, the pandemic that recently went through. You would be too young to remember this, but you were also born into what economists call the Great Recession, which had a really hard impact on many of your parents. So for some reason, everything we look at today in terms of numbers, the numbers of people in your age group committing suicide, the number of people needing mental health treatment, medication, whatever, Do you experience that? Not you maybe personally, but do you see your generation that way?
Yeah, definitely. I have experienced, still do, depression and anxiety, especially. My sister and friends and family, like we all deal with some sort of anxiety, and I think that it just wasn't talked about in your generation and before, and just older people in general. They don't talk about it because they just think they're ashamed of it, you know, or they just don't think that anyone feels the same, and what's the point in bringing it up? They'll just think I'm crazy or just I'm insecure or something, you know? So
yeah, but
we bring it to the
also, I
light.
read this stuff, it's heartbreaking to me because what really bothers me is I've taught for so long and I've always tried to be the best I could be, not always perfect, but I've always enjoyed students and everything. But until I did this podcast, I really don't think I knew you.
Yeah.
And I don't mean just you, I just met you, but I mean as a generation. But when I've come in here and asked questions, people give very honest, very sincere, very heartfelt answers. And they tell me stuff I don't know, but I get very depressed leaving here, and that's one of them. Because I mean, it's heart-wrenching to see, you know, where did all this come from? So the bottom line is, it just seems like we're in a time where, you know, we've got to address these things. Because every person that sat down here has shared a heartfelt expression like you have. I haven't had one person not. And it wasn't like we came on to just talk about depressing things, you know, but that's where it leads. So, you know, what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, for a long time I thought I wanted to be a therapist because I think that really helps people. And myself, I've gone to many therapists and counselors, and there's great counselors at school that have helped me through anxiety and panic attacks there. But I think overall what can help people is just family. Like, there actually is a quote, you know the quote saying, blood is thicker than water.
Oh, yeah.
The real quote is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb.
Oh my gosh.
So meaning the family you create for yourself, the people who love you for who you truly are, your friends, they will be there for you. They are thicker than the water of the womb, the people who have turned their backs on you or bullied you your whole life, mistreated you, abused you. They are nothing compared to what you can create for yourself.
Wow. Well, I've never heard of it put that way, but well articulated.
Yeah, but they can help you through anything if you let them.
All right.
Cry on someone's shoulder, don't cry alone.
All right, I like that. All right, let me do a few more negative, and then we're going to end on a positive note, okay? I don't ever like to end on a negative note. All right, this is, once again, is very depressing to me. A lot of people in your generation say they don't believe life's going to get better. And 42% feel down, hopeless, and depressed. I just find that just so sad.
Yeah.
Do you think things aren't going to get better?
It's really all in your mindset.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I was so
you seem very
depressed.
positive and
Well, I do now.
optimistic. Okay, all right. So now you're on the right. Well, then what do you think happened to you to really turn you around? Or maybe a better question would be, how would you attack the problem of your generation, or how would you approach it based on your personal experience and how you feel right now, saying you came from this other place and now you're on the more positive path?
I would tell people, your mind is your best tool. What you think comes true. The law of attraction, what you say, what you put into motion is what's going to be pulled towards you. So if you say, man, today's a bad day, or nothing's going to get better, nothing is going to get better, and today's going to be a bad day.
Okay. All right.
But if you change your mindset, if you have been hurt and you're having a bad day, be like, I want today to be a good day, and I know I'm hurting right now, but tomorrow is going to be great. And feel that in your heart. Feel that, and give thanks for it.
Well, I got to tell you, that's as close as a positive note to get close to end on that there can be. Well, I just want to tell you something. I mean this with all sincerity. I've been a Christian for quite a while, and I haven't in the podcast in the past shared much, but for some reason I feel led to do it right now. When we were walking across campus, because like I said, there was supposed to be somebody else sitting here today, and I'm sure something came up. So when Stanley and me, we were coming across the campus, I said, well, let's just pray we run into somebody, and you know, God send us somebody. Well, you know how many times you think people say that? They say, well, it just sounds like a good thing to say, positive, but you don't believe it. since I've been doing this podcast, I'm believing. So when we came down the hallway, we both looked over, we saw you, and Stanley goes, yeah, I know, we probably seem like creepers, but Stanley goes, hey, that looks, she looks like she might fit. Like, we don't have a stereotype, but for some reason we looked down, we saw you in financial aid, and I just wanted to tell you honestly, I really do believe we did not meet by accident. Everything you've shared is just, you've given a lot of what other people have already mentioned in a very articulate, different way, but a very compassionate and caring one. And I don't know your mom or the other people in your life, but you've surrounded yourself with some good people. I can tell. So I just want to tell you thanks a lot. I'm glad we ran into you, and I'm glad all this worked out.
Everything happens how it's supposed to. So.
God bless you. It does. All right. Well, hey, that's it for us on New South Christians. I don't know what to say, but another miracle. We had Margo with us today, and I know I've been blessed, and I hope you've been blessed too. So God bless you, and have a happy day.
You don't